Okay, Madam Chair, we're all set.
Okay, I bet you didn't think that IT was going to be part of your job description.
No. Well,
We have minutes from September that you've had ample time to look at. And so I will call and ask for a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Is there, all right, all those in
of
favor?
September 8th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, there is
Excuse me,
no.
Lorna,
excuse
you have to have a roll call vote.
I have to take a roll call vote. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Mary Beth,
Here?
you need to say aye or nay.
Aye.
Joan?
Joan Godecki, aye.
All right, Lorna Wade, aye. So the minutes have been approved, and for the September 8th meeting in 2020. There is no new business on the agenda, and so now we have old business. Dawn's going to hopefully finish this up so that we can either approve and pass this on to the Board of Selectmen. It's been on the table for a long time. So Dawn, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, it's funny. I've been working on this issue of compensation for quite a while, and I came across a sentence that I think might help the Personnel Board hopefully put into perspective what it is we're trying to establish relative to a process to pay positions and pay employees. And so let me just read you this sentence. What the process that we followed in developing the plan that you have in front of you has been done in accordance with the Massachusetts pay equity law. And that's a law that was passed now about 2 years ago that basically says that you should pay positions based on the concept of equal pay for work of equal or comparable value. So let me say that again, to pay positions based on the concept of equal pay for work of comparable value.
Mhm.
And the question is, how do you measure comparable value? It's something that we're just not used to doing. As I think I said to the Personnel Board when we first met, your current plan is basically driven by dollars and cents. In other words, you're measuring equal pay based on money, based on dollars and cents, whether it be market data or whether it be rate of pay or some other dollars and cent form. But what you're not doing is what I just said the Equal Pay Act requires you to do, and that is to pay positions based on, again, what the law quotes as comparable value. So measuring comparable value is basically done not by tasks, but rather by the skill, when I say competency, another word for competency would be the knowledge and or the level of responsibility that you require an employee to have in order to carry out their tasks. And that's a very, very important distinction to make. In other words, you know, when people look at job descriptions, one of the first things they always zero right in on it are what are those essential functions? And you know, there's always qualifying language that's been put into the draft descriptions that we've written, as well as any other job description I've ever seen, that says that you may be required, or the following list of essential functions is not meant to list every single thing you do. In fact, it's impossible to do that. Well, the Comparable Equal Pay Act, or the Pay Equity Law, excuse me, basically says the same thing. In other words, we're not going to measure the value, what you need to know, or the ability or skill you need to have. That's what we're going to measure, but not based on tasks, because the tasks change all the time. So irregardless of what you require someone to do, and you know and I know that changes all the time. Madam Chairman, you just mentioned to John that did he ever think that he was going to have IT skills? Well, John knows better than all of us. You know, in order for him to do his job properly, he's had to develop IT skills that were not in his job description a year ago, probably, or 2 years ago, or what have you. Or they essentially have changed, like, i.e. the technology that I struggle to use all the time now in the Zoom meetings that we all deal with all the time. Well, Zoom didn't exist a year ago. So John had to have the ability, the skill, the knowledge, the experience, let's say, to learn how to do that. Whether it was in his job description or not, he knows better than anybody what he needs to know in order to do his job. Well, that's the principle that really is behind the plan that you now have presented, that I presented to you. Okay. And between the last meeting and tonight, or today's meeting, there was one basic adjustment that I made based on feedback that I'd gotten, not just from members of the personnel board, but also from your town accountant. And that was specifically the accounting assistant position that you now see being recommended at grade level 2, not grade level 1. What moved that position from 1 to 2 was the feedback that I got from the town accountant, who basically said, yeah, she thought, now that she better understood the characteristics that define each of the grade levels, that level 2 was more accurate than level 1, in her opinion. Okay. So it's not me saying that to you today. It's the town accountant saying that to you. Okay. And that's the nice thing about this process, measuring value based on, first of all, how a department head manages positions within his or her department, but ultimately, and I know I've said this before, but ultimately based on how the town, specifically the Board of Selectmen, approves job descriptions. So employees, department heads play a critical role because they're the ones who require employees to do something day in and day out. Or an employee may take the initiative to learn how to do something because he or she thinks it's necessary to do the job properly or effectively.
Don,
So-
I have my documents up. If you want to choose one of these, you can see on your screen the different documents that I have available. I'm
Yeah,
happy
well,
to
the
put them
first,
up for you.
that one I think we want to skip by, John. That's the policy document.
Okay.
And again, just to let the personnel board know, once the selectmen have indicated a tentative approval of the proposed plan, then, as I think I told the selectmen first time I met with them, we're going to recommend a set of administrative policies be established in support of the plan. And that's what John just put up on the screen. Okay. So the personnel board should be aware of that. That's something that ultimately, we're going to ask the personnel board to review and recommend, which again, basically describes how we've developed the plan. So if you can move to you have the characteristic chart, John? It's the Word document there. No, not the handbook. Oh, where is the characteristic chart? I think it's the first one. No, that's the agenda.
Survey report, including
No, I don't see the
proposed
characteristic.
salary range.
Oops.
Well, if the board remember I gave you a chart that describes the characteristics that define each of the 5 grade levels that are being recommended,
Right.
or excuse me, each of the 6 grade levels. I only begin by just mentioning that, and just so that the board keeps in mind that this characteristic chart, it's the one that looks like this.
Yeah.
Right. It says
I have
characteristic.
it in front of me.
Yeah, I do
Good.
too.
That's the chart that you should always refer to unless you decide to add it or change this document. This describes how we got the 6 grade levels. If nothing else, it reemphasizes that these are the so-called skills, competencies, and responsibilities that are described on this document. Okay. So the proposed classification plan is based on the characteristics that define each of the grade levels. I don't know if the board has any questions about how positions are being recommended at this point. The only change, again, as I just said a little while ago, was between last time and today is that accounting assistant being recommended to be classified at grade level 2. Any other questions about
No.
the proposed grade level? Okay. So let's move to that salary range schedule chart, John, that you just had up a minute ago. It's the Excel.
So much for my wicked skills, huh? Stand by.
John, you're making me look bad. No,
For all
I'm
my
only
error.
kidding. You had it before. If you go back to my email, or the one what Michelle sent out. Personnel board docs. It's the third one down. There you go. Okay, now if you go to the, which one is it? It's the one in the left-hand corner at the bottom. There you go. Okay, let's start with that one. So this is, if you go up to the top of the chart, if you can scroll up to the, just so people know which one we're looking at. Oh, wait a minute. This is an old one.
Yeah, the accounting assistant is still in level 1.
Yeah. No, it should be level
It's an
2.
updated one.
Oh,
I'm really messing up.
Just bear with me 1 second. I want to get it in front of me too. How come I don't have the right one?
Okay, you added it
Oh,
on there.
I got it.
Pretty,
You changed it.
pretty nifty, Michelle.
No, I didn't do it. John did it.
Oh, John, kudos.
Smart.
Yeah. All right. So in order to make this accurate, you'd have to go back, and if you click on the proposed salary range benchmark, to $20.45, just click on that cell up at the top, column D. Yeah, right there. Just click on that for a second. No, just click right on the cell. There you go. Oh, all right. That doesn't show you the formula. I thought it might show you the formula. Well, this is an important chart that shows you basically how we've developed salary ranges consistent with the 6th grade levels. And I apologize again if I'm repeating myself, but I think it bears repeating. So the benchmark number is not a number that you pay anyone automatically. What it's meant to reflect is the market, the survey average midpoint of the marketplace for each group of positions. So if you go over to column G, the fiscal 20, that's it. Those 3 numbers you see there, those midpoint numbers, if you add them together and divide by 3, you actually get $19.04. All right, that 2040 is from the old chart. So the salary range benchmark, by definition, is the salary survey, the average of the salary survey midpoint for each grade level. So, and remember, everything we do needs to be done consistently. And so each benchmark is calculated exactly the same way. It's an actual market number, but it's the average of all the market data we've collected, specifically the midpoint for each grade level. That's how we use the market data. Okay. Sometimes people get a little bit confused, or they want to know, well, how did you use the marketplace, the market data to help you develop ranges? Remember, there's 3 criteria that this chart will show you that we're using to define the word competitive. So for me to present a salary range plan along with the grade levels to the selectmen, in my opinion, it needs to be competitive with the marketplace, and it also needs to be competitive internally. The internal competitiveness is determined by the classification plan or process. The external competitiveness is determined, first of all, by the market data. So the minimum and the maximum for each salary range are tied directly to the benchmark number. And that's done intentionally, so that as you collect new data going forward, what's important for the board to understand is that we're now also recommending a process to maintain the competitiveness of the plan. This is not a one-time type of thing, just the opposite. It's a process that, hopefully you use going forward to maintain the plan competitively with the market. Yeah, go ahead.
Don, the custodian for the library at 1428, how does that reflect the minimum, midpoint, and maximum on that level?
Where's the, actually.
It's level 1. It's
I'm
grade
sorry.
level 1.
So your question is, how does the 1428 relate to that?
Through those 3 numbers, because
Right.
it certainly is not anywhere in between any of those numbers.
That's right. And so if you look at the columns I, J, and K, and let's stay right with the custodian.
Okay, yeah.
What that's showing you is that if you have a minimum of $16.36, which is column C, right? Compared to 1428, the $14.28 is about 17% below that minimum, that number.
Is that what you were using with all of them?
And well, those percentages are showing you the current rate of pay I'm sorry. Wait. I got ahead of myself. I stand corrected. I apologize.
Okay,
That 17% is the 1636 compared to the survey average minimum for the custodian, the $19.18.
mm-hmm,
So $16.36 is about 17% below $19.18. Those three numbers, columns I, J, and K, are comparing the proposed range to the market data. Okay,
he's not at,
That's the-
he's not at $16, he's at $14.28.
that's right.
Okay,
You're jumping to the second criteria, which is the one which is good. Remember, there's three criteria we're using. First one is the market data. The second one is the one that Lorna is just talking about, and that is comparing the $14.28 to the benchmark, to that survey average midpoint, which is the next to the last column over to the right-hand side. And as you can see, it says minus 43%. Right? Everybody sees that?
Mhm.
His current rate of pay of $14.28 is 43% below the survey salary range benchmark. Now, and let me just touch on the third criteria. The third one is how long the person's been in the position, which is the far right-hand column. And he's been a custodian apparently for 2 years. Now, in order to interpret the data, what I've also recommended to the board is that there are two guidelines to use to interpret this data. To interpret market data, I recommend simply using plus or minus 15%. So if you compare the custodians, the current rate of pay, the proposed rate of pay of 1636 to the survey data for the custodian of $19.18, $16.36 is about 17% below the market data, a little bit more than 15%. Whereas the proposed maximum of 2618 is about almost 21% greater than the survey data maximum average data for the custodian. You see the $20.73.
mm-hmm,
Okay. So the way to answer your question, we use the rate of pay of the employee. Oh, and then last but not least, he's only been there 2 years. My guideline that I use to interpret years of service is 3 years. In other words, if someone's been in their position at least 3 years, and that's an arbitrary number. You know, there's nothing magical about 3. You might feel as a board that one's a better measurement standard or guideline. I think 3 is reasonable. It's not 5, it's not 10 years of service. What's that saying is within 3 years, in my opinion, the employee should be paid competitive. And we'll show you when we get to the next chart how we're defining what I call a market equity range. So it isn't just one number that we're comparing to, it's a minimum maximum range that we're comparing to. Okay, so
Right.
again, the answer, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, so my question is, the first column, well, not
Yeah.
column A, column B, that is
Correct.
presently what these people are earning.
Correct.
Column C is what we're proposing to move them to?
No, not them. We're talking about the position initially. That's a good point, Lauren. I'm glad you brought that up. All we're talking about at the moment is paying a position. We're not talking about an employee. So the
Okay.
first question is, remember, what we're proposing is a competitive classification and compensation plan. And competitive, again, is internally, which is determined by the classification plan primarily, but it also means competitive externally. So the external competitiveness is determined by 3 criteria. So that $14.28, what we're trying to determine is the proposed range of what you have on this chart is 1636 to 2618, minimum maximum. The question is that minimum maximum competitive by those 3 criteria? Okay, that's the question.
Okay.
And the way we determine whether it's competitive or not is first compare the proposed range to the salary data, which is what those percentage numbers in columns I, J, and K show you.
Mm-hmm.
The second criteria for that range to be competitive is the employee rate of pay. And how does that compare to the benchmark? And then the third criteria is how long the employee has been in their position.
Okay.
So the conclusion that I draw from this proposed range, and just keep in mind, the range that's actually, we haven't adjusted the cells when John moved the accounting assistant. So these numbers you see in front of you were the numbers from the last meeting. The actual numbers being recommended if you want to write it down, or you should have it, I hope, is the minimum instead of $16.36 for grade level 1, it's $15.23, and the maximum is now a little bit less, $24.37. The reason for the change is we took the market data for the accounting assistant out of grade level 1's calculation. Okay.
Yeah.
And those are pretty high numbers, as you can see from that chart. We took it out because we moved the accounting assistant down to grade level 2. So
But
I
I
had to
think
recalculate.
if we all agree on the premise, we should probably, I notice a few things that need to be changed on this chart. I think before we present the final version, if the personnel board agrees and votes on the premise, we should take a look at, make sure everything's lining up the way it should.
Oh, yeah.
Like from Michelle, for example, she's listed as 2 years of service here, which needs to be changed.
Well, that's right. Both, I've mentioned this, I think, to Michelle before. The years of service and the current rate of pay need to be double checked. All right. We want to make sure those are
Right.
accurate.
So,
Okay.
so that's part of
So
the
it-
exercise before we go to the Board of Selectmen with it.
Yeah, that's a good point,
The
John.
personnel board's okay with that.
So it's really the process. Yeah, you're right. It's the process that I'm asking the personnel board to approve. And obviously, based on what the actual numbers are, have been developed based on the process. So each grade level salary range has been developed exactly the same way. One of the things that I look at that I want to draw your attention to is if you just look at column D for a second and just go down that column, you notice how it goes up for each grade level, and it goes up by odd amounts of money. It's not a fixed percentage. But what that shows you, because the benchmark number, meaning the survey average midpoint for grade level 6 is greater than grade level 4, it's greater than grade level 5 or 4, and so on. What that tells me is that our grade level structure is consistent with the market data. And the benchmark number, again, is actual market numbers. Those are real numbers. Those are not adjusted or modified in any way, shape, or form. Those are the actual numbers that I collected. But what that reinforces, in my mind at least, and it should say to you as the personnel board, is that the grade level structure, what we're trying to do is pay positions, the higher the level of responsibility, the higher the level of compensation, which gets back to what I said initially. What's driving this compensation plan is the comparable value or the comparable worth of positions, not the market data. Okay. And that's a critically important concept or process for you to be comfortable with, because it relates back to you've been relying on market data and solely market data to help you determine how to pay an employee more money or less money. It's very, very misleading. It's not consistent with the value of a position, as we've just shown you. Okay. And that's a fundamental change. It's a huge change in terms of how employees, the non-union employees, are to be treated with regard to how their positions are to be paid. And then secondly, how the employee is to be paid, which we haven't gotten to yet. Okay. So what I would ask the personnel board at this point to be comfortable with, and I guess to approve, once again, is the process, that I've just outlined for you. We'll make sure, as I said, these proposed salary ranges, if you go back to the email, John, see if you can pull up the salary range schedule. Where's the salary range schedule? There it is. That's the one. Okay. These are the correct numbers. What I wanted to show the board, this is what I call a summary of the plan, the compensation plan, consistent with the 6 grade levels. You see the benchmark number right in the middle, right? That $19.04, I just walked you through it where that number came from. That's the survey average midpoint for the salary data we collected for grade level 1. And again, if you just go down that column, you can see how it increases. The higher the grade level, the higher the benchmark. That's just the way it came out. We didn't know that was going to happen. I hoped it would happen, but you never know until you put the numbers down. The point I simply want to make on this chart is you see it in yellow and red. Hiring pay band, again, is a policy I'm going to recommend to you that new employees for the town of Dudley should be hired within the hiring pay band, with the understanding that the town reserves the right to hire a new employee above the hiring pay band based on their qualifications or the market changes in market conditions. So you always have the flexibility to hire employees where you want to hire them. But the policy says all things considered equal, meaning based on the qualifications of the employee and the market data, you should be able to hire a brand new employee in positions in grade level 1 somewhere between $15.23 and $17.14. But your hands aren't tied. That's not etched in stone. You don't have to do that. The policy will give you the flexibility to hire an employee where you think it's appropriate. In other words, how competitive. What we've done now is define the word competitive. So in order to be paid competitively, what I'm saying is that minimally, the employee should be paid somewhere between, as John's highlighted, in grade level 1, somewhere between $17.14 and $21.71. If you go back to that custodian, who we've already determined his or her current rate of pay is not competitive, that $14.28 is significantly below the marketplace. What does significant mean? Significant means greater than 15%. So we're not making these, these statements, we can explain them all. They're defined by the actual numbers. But it's a range so ultimately once the board has approved the tentative plan, what John has asked me to do is to work with you and the employees to develop a process to pay an employee. So the question is going to be, knowing that the custodian today is not paid competitively, remember, you don't have to pay him competitively. I say him, it could be a her, but you don't have to pay that employee necessarily competitively. The question is going to be, do you want to? Based on the fact that the employee has only been there, according to my chart, 2 years, less than 3. What that means to me, based on that policy, is you don't have to pay him competitively. You're still complying with the policy. Now, if he's been there more than 3 years, say 5, as some of the library aides, you got some library aides that have been there 10 years, 9 years, 6 years. They're all significantly underpaid. Although, again, if you go over and look at that previous chart, you'll notice that the percentages for those, some of the library aides are currently being paid basically $15 an hour, and they're about 25% below the market, below that survey average benchmark, but they've only been there a couple of years. But there is a library aide that's been there 10 years, whose rate of pay today is $16.81, and his or her rate of pay today is 13% below the marketplace. So it's within that 15, but she's been there 10 years. By then, based on the way the policy is written, the employee, in my opinion, should be paid competitively. That's a decision the town will have to make. The question then becomes, how do we want to use competitiveness as a criteria to pay employees more money? And we'll get to the employee part in the next part of the study. Okay. So
a question.
Yeah.
Looking at the chart that's before us. So we have somebody that comes in, and you're telling me that John has the flexibility to pay that person anywhere from $15.23 to $21.71?
No.
Or does he have the flexibility between $15.23 and $17.14?
No, I have never read your policies, Lorna, so I just, the way I would interpret this chart is that the town, whether it's John or the selectmen,
Okay, right.
have the flexibility, that's a key word, to pay a new employee in grade level 1 somewhere between $15.23 and $24.37. The maximum.
Whoa.
Unless
the problem I have with that is that it allows for capriciousness.
Well,
And
that's
so,
I hear you.
it affects.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I'm not saying, John, that you would be capricious, and I'm not looking at necessarily you. I'm looking at further out there. I don't think that it should ever be a situation where somebody comes in and all things equal gets paid at a higher rate than somebody who's been there for 3 years or 4 years. I mean, then I'm saying all things being equal.
Well, I think that if I could, I think we're trying to get away from this.
Right.
This is where the problem lies.
Okay,
That's right.
The market for the minimum rate of pay to hire somebody in grade level 1 is $17.
Mm-hmm.
And we're $2 behind that. So we have to take a look at a level 1 employee and go from $15 and find a path forward to at least get to this benchmark, depending on the level of service. And if this grade level 1 employee were to leave service now, we would certainly not look to hire his or her replacement 1523. We would be looking at the starting point of $17.14.
Okay, all right, that clarifies.
So
Let me just take it one step further, John. And because Lorna, you raised an excellent point. Remember, I said the policy that I'm recommending to the board is that new employees. So we're talking about two different types of employees. There's the new employee, and then there's the current employee. So the new employee, what I'm suggesting, the policy would read, is the policy of the town is to hire a new employee somewhere within that hiring pay band, depending upon where the position is classified. Okay. Remember, I said there's like a comma that says, with the understanding that the town reserves the right to hire above the hiring pay band based on the qualifications of the employee, the applicant, and also the market conditions. What that really means, Lorna, in practical terms, is that John would have to come before you or the selectmen if he were to recommend a new employee to be hired greater than $17.14, let's say a custodian, okay? He would have to show you that either the market has changed, or here's what the market is today, and or here are the qualifications of the employee to support starting the employee above the hiring pay band. So it doesn't happen automatically, okay?
So for example, let's say we had it's a part-time position. Let's go back to the custodian, part-time at the library, a part-time position. Let's say we had a custodian from the high school retire and wanted to pick up part-time work, but he's been the custodian, at the high school for 15 or 20 years. We would probably be looking based on 15 or 20 years of service, at least to hire him or her at that benchmark.
Okay, all right. And
at
Don, did you not say at the last meeting that you had a certain number of years where you would hope that somebody would reach benchmark?
No, we haven't determined that.
Okay.
No, not
I
at all.
think we mentioned 3 years at one point, Don, right?
You did.
Well,
I thought,
we did, but that would be, how long it takes or how you move within the range. So let's talk about a current employee. What we just talked about was a new employee. A current employee, in putting this range in front of you, I wanted to show you, and let's just stay with grade level 1, all right? I'm comfortable recommending $15.23 as a minimum, because what I did, if you look at the other chart, that salary range, the survey data chart, and you look at the current rates of pay of all the current employees, there's only one employee. Actually, I stand corrected. Yeah, there's only one employee in that grade level 1 whose current rate of pay is below $15.23.
that's this custodian.
Yeah, there you go. We're picking on this poor custodian.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm just thinking ahead as $15 as a minimum wage. That's what I'm looking at.
Right. So ideally, I wanted to show the board a range structure in a perfect scenario. All the employees currently would be above the minimum that's being recommended. That's another way of saying it wouldn't cost you any money. In other words, everybody would start somewhere within this proposed range. So of the, 7 or 8 employees in grade level 1, all but one of them, current rate of pay is greater than $15.23. By my definition, that's competitive. Even though, and then what I did, just to be comfortable, if I had the custodian sitting in front of me right at the moment, I would look at the market data for the position, and you can see the survey average minimum for the custodian was $19.18. In other words, of the custodians we surveyed, the average minimum was $19.18. That just reinforces the fact that that current employee is not being paid competitively. There's no question about it, at least by my definition. Okay. Remember, I said the question that we're going to address next is, do you want to do something about it? And if so, which gets back to, how many years will it take? That's another way of saying, what's it going to cost you to move an employee from a non-competitive rate of pay somewhere up to that market equity pay band? Okay. And we'll talk about that at the next step in the study when we're talking about paying employees.
I've been monopolizing a lot of questions. Joan or Mary Beth, do you have any questions about these two sections so far?
I have a question. If you hire somebody, like you said, that had 15 years experience, forget the custodian, I'm talking about clerks now. If you're going to give them the 2045, what about the current employees that aren't making that much?
Well, that's part of the, if I could, Madam Chairman, that's part of the issue here. We would have to, there's a lot of moving parts to this plan. It can't be, we need to, I think Don's very well intended with saying it's not going to cost the town any money, but it is. If we go down the path that I'd like to go down, it's going to cost us money, because it's not just a matter of hiring people within that market equity pay band. It's a matter of showing progress to bringing employees that are not within that pay band, current employees, up to it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's my
so for
concern.
example, if the custodian left, we'll go back to the custodian and we said, okay, here comes somebody with 15 years experience, 1904. That's what we're going to look to hire him or her into. We've also got to address grade 1, grade 2, those people who may be underpaid according to this market equity pay band, and make steady progress to bring them up to where they should be. So it's got to be a lot of moving parts. It can't just be a plan that, to me, the study does us no good if we don't move everybody. We don't address every single position we have, whether it's a current employee or if it's a future employee. I think we need to be within that red proposed pay band.
So,
Right.
so
Yeah, I was just-
philosophically, so
Go ahead, I'm sorry,
philosophically, John, this is a concept that I feel comfortable with. Practically speaking, for these times, for these COVID times, and looking at budgets, how do you see this how do you see this moving in a practical manner?
I'm going to listen to Don first to see how he sees it moving in a practical manner, and then I'm sure we'll be on the same page. But it can't happen it's not going to happen July 1st where everybody's going to be at benchmark or max.
Let me try to answer your question, Lorna. Yeah, let me try to, hopefully answer your question and help make you feel comfortable. This is basically a two-step process. What's before the board at the moment is a plan to pay positions competitively based on, again, what I keep referring to as the comparable value of a position.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, the skill, the effort, the responsibility required, which is measured by the position rating process, the classification plan. Moving forward, the next step would be then, based on this plan, in other words, before we can determine cost, and John's correct, ultimately there is a cost associated with paying employees. When I said no cost before, I was talking about paying positions. It doesn't cost anything theoretically, technically, to pay a position. When we're ready to talk about paying employees, the question that I want the board to ask is, what's the best way to spend the money? In other words, once the town, meaning specifically John, determines what the town can afford to spend in terms of paying employees more money, right? Whatever that number winds up being for a particular fiscal year, my point is very simply to give you the flexibility to sit back and discuss and ultimately decide what's the best way to spend that money, unlike the way you've been doing it. In the past, up until now, you've simply decided, well, we think a way to pay employees more money has been to appropriate the equivalent of a certain percentage, which you have called cost of living, and everyone's gotten that same percentage increase, right? That's the way you've been, as I understand it, that's the way you've been doing it. What I'm ultimately going to recommend to the board as the next step is to change that process. You can still, if you decide to pay everyone that same percentage, you can still do that. But what I want to have a conversation with the board about is there are other ways to pay employees besides just giving everyone the same percentage increase across the board. And I would submit to you that there are more effective, more equitable, fairer ways to do that. And we'll get into the details, when we get to that next step in the study. But I want to get back to, in order for me to show you a plan today, those proposed ranges, minimum, maximum, in my opinion, strictly me saying this to you, needed to be competitive based on those three criteria that I mentioned earlier, right? If you look at the clerks, the question was raised a minute ago about the clerk positions. They're in grade level 2 at the moment. If you look at their current rates of pay, and again, all you have to do is look at that proposed salary range, the survey data chart, and you'll see them all there. All their rates of pay right now, every single one of them, with the exception, once again, there's one individual that sticks out. There's one person, one employee today, whose current rate of pay is lower than $16.36 an hour. And that's one out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 clerks that I've identified on this chart. There's 2 of them. I stand corrected, whose current rate of pay is below the 1636. So the majority of the employees are above that minimum that's been recommended. And if you go down through the grade levels and go through the same exercise I just went through, you'll see that that most of the employees, the overwhelming majority of the employees, 90%, if not greater, their current rates of pay are above the proposed minimums, which means that the proposed ranges are competitive, both internally as well as externally. Where we go from here, to answer your cost issue and how to spend the money, that's when we'll talk about, based on what employees' current rates of pay are, and what's going to drive that process is cost, which means what the town can afford. And then we'll have a conversation, hopefully, of different ways to spend that money. Okay. Whether you want to continue to spend the money the way you've been doing it, or whether you want to consider making a change. Those are all issues that are on the table for discussion.
So it does all depend on the budget too.
That's what I mean by what you can afford. Absolutely. It's all determined upon, once you determine what that budget line item is, then the question then becomes one of, what's the best way to spend that dollar amount? So the role of the finance committee, for example, is to recommend obviously a budget. And in doing so, one aspect of the budget is what you can afford to spend on paying current employees or new employees for that matter. Okay. And what I found in my experience is that question just is not asked. Rarely do I find that you've taken the time to really have a conversation about different ways to spend the money. And that's what I'm encouraging the personnel board to be able to do. And I think by doing that, at least then you'll be managing compensation more effectively. Okay. Now, I don't want to leave you. I always feel concerned that I'm emphasizing too much the negative. The upshot of this proposed salary schedule plan you see in front of you is that most of your employees are today being paid competitively. And that's good news to the town, in my opinion. Doesn't mean the employee doesn't want to be paid more money. But whether you knew it or not, or whether you know it or not, most of your employees today, or I should say a good number of them, and I'm looking at the percentage numbers. I got to see, I'm looking at them a lot closer than I did before. A good number, it's almost 50-50, let's put it that way. But there are a good number of employees that are not being paid competitively today that we'll have to talk about, and what you want to do about that. But there are quite a few people that are also today being paid competitively. Your highway superintendent, for example, is one of them. He's being paid competitively today. Even though he's been there a long time, his current rate of pay is about 8.5% greater than the survey average benchmark. For 30 years of service, you think he'd be a little bit higher than that, but you've met the policy. You've met that he is being paid competitively. Whether it's competitive enough or whether it should be more, well, that's a whole different question. Okay. So again, what's before the board is a plan consisting of grade levels and salary ranges. And what I've tried to describe to you is the process that we followed in developing both aspects of the plan, grade levels and salary ranges. Any other questions?
Question that I have is not on the exact numbers in here, and Lorna and Joan, I appreciate the questions that you had on that. Mine is more of voting on a process. I'm used to voting on a particular document to approve. I don't understand the concept of voting to approve a process, especially when the numbers that we're looking at on some of the pages had discrepancies on them. For instance, Michelle's 2 years of service versus however long it is. It seems odd to me to what is a process that we're voting on if it's not, if it's that last the document that we were looking at first, then, but that wasn't even all, it was a draft. It was filled in, there were blanks in it. I don't understand the concept of voting on a process.
I think what Don can correct me. I think what he's asking us is, yes, there are some discrepancies on the documents, but the documents are not necessarily the process. The process is, instead of compensating people with a 2% COLA, that what we're looking at as far as compensating people and how we hire people is that the process is looking at what the position necessitates for qualifications, and those qualifications become more intense as you go up the scale. And so rather than, I think we're looking at a process of how you disseminate money when money is approved in a budget for people who are already employed, and how we hire new employees. Am I right, Don?
Well, with all due respect, no.
No, and I got it completely
and I
wrong.
mean that very respectfully. I'm not trying to be critical.
No,
Mary,
don't take it
I want
offensively.
to answer Mary Beth. When I said no, I don't think you're being accurate. Meaning, it is Mary Beth, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I want to answer your question specifically so you feel comfortable. The two documents that you have in front of you that we're asking you to approve, this is one of them that you see on the screen right at the moment, and that is accurate. Okay. The other document that we're asking you to approve is not the detail chart we were just looking at a minute ago that has some mistakes on it. That's the backup chart. The plan that we're asking you to approve is the plan that shows you the grade levels with the positions being classified. That is accurate. Those are the
that
two.
I'm comfortable with.
That is the plan. The other document, okay, that we were using as detail really is where it was being pointed out that there may be some years of service numbers. Those need to be corrected. That's the support document. Just like what's behind the grade level chart, as you know, is a point rating chart. I'm not asking you to approve the point rating chart. It's based on how we applied the point rating system that we got the grade levels. It's the grade levels that we're asking you to approve. Okay. So we are asking you to approve. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, because I want to make sure that whatever we approve, that somebody can come in 5 years from now and say, well, they approved a process, but what is it? So that makes more sense to me.
That's an excellent question. Just as the salary survey charts are a backup to tell you how we got the benchmark number that we were discussing before, those are the detailed charts. You need to see those so you can understand, what's behind, these two proposed charts, this salary range schedule chart and the grade level chart. So you know how we got them. We just didn't make it up. In fact, just the opposite, as I keep saying, there's a process behind both of those. These are the detailed charts that back that up, right? You're the only one. The employees don't see all these detailed charts unless you want to show them to them. You need to know them. John needs to know how they're done, because going forward, he's going to have to manage this process. And so someone needs to know within the town how to do this, right? So that you can continually maintain this plan competitively, internally and externally. But that was a great question.
So Don, just to clarify, we'll be looking at a grade level chart when we hire a new employee, where the position falls within the grade level chart. And then the
Correct.
salary range structure is defined by what we see on the screen. So if we hire a grade level 3 employee, we'll be looking at this market equity pay band right here.
That's
and we'll
right.
Figure out, for example, well, I'm just going to use the 3 years of service, just for point of example. Somebody who comes in at 5 years of previous service, we'd be looking in this area between here and here for a grade level 3 to hire a new employee. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Again, that's always subject to what you can afford.
Well, I think we have to kind of come at this with the premise that if we can't afford to hire an employee at a market rate and compete and be competitive, then we can't afford to hire the employee.
Well, again, that's a valid point to make, John. All I'm saying is that that's a separate conversation from the plan. My objective in developing this plan with you is to give you the structure then to work within so that you do it consistently. And again, using that grade level 3 as an example, remember the policy would say you should be able to hire a new employee who meets the minimum qualifications of the position somewhere between the hiring pay band minimum and maximum, 2137 to 2404, with the understanding you have the right to hire above it, but at least then you'll know you're paying competitively. And you haven't really been able to determine whether you're paying somebody competitively before, but now you'll know what you're doing. So you'll be able to communicate that to the employee, which you haven't been doing in the past. And you get that one-time opportunity, particularly when you hire a new employee, to say to that new employee, here's how you're going to be treated both when we hire you, but also going forward, right? And it is the value, it's the policy, hopefully, of the town. It'd be premature for me to presume anything about, I'd like to think that the town of Dudley wants to pay employees competitively the way you just described, John, but I don't know if that's true or not. I can only tell you that there are a number of employees today that are not being paid competitively, that have been in their positions more than 3 years and are more than 15% below that benchmark. So if that has been your policy, you haven't complied with it. And I don't mean that negatively.
I'm kind of saying that, Don, just because I think I'm on the same page with the personnel board. If we're going to hire people, let's hire them competitively.
I think that, personally, I think that makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, that's something that the Board of Selectmen obviously needs to weigh in on as the hiring authority.
So Don, once more, I want, just for clarification,
Sure.
you want us to approve the 2 documents that you have set before us.
Correct.
But when we're approving those 2 documents, we are approving the process by which those documents were determined.
That's exactly right.
But I also do think that we're also putting into effect a process by which we hire people and place them on a salary scale, or how we compensate and look at how we've been compensating people who are already employed, and how do we make that equitable?
You're right. That's correct.
Okay.
We're looking at both.
All right. Then
You're absolutely right.
I'm comfortable with that. Joan, do you have any concerns?
No, I don't like to vote on something. I know we're doing it on the process, but I just don't like that it's not correct yet.
Well, we're not voting on those. We're only voting on 2 specific documents. This one that's in front of us on the screen right now, which I realize you can't see, which is, I can't see.
Yes, I see it.
Oh, you can?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So that one and the grade level charts.
Right.
The
Let's put that one up, Don.
chart.
Which one is that?
The characteristic chart.
That's the one that's missing.
It's the one that's missing.
It's not there, John.
It's the one that you said you had before you, Joan.
Yes, I have it right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, Joan, it should be the one that has the accounting assistant at grade level 2.
Oh, that's not the characteristic chart then. That is the salary chart.
No, it's the classification plan, that we're talking about. It's not the characteristic chart. It's the classification plan chart.
And that's the one that some of the years have to be fixed.
No,
No,
So,
the classification plan chart simply shows you the 6 grade levels and where positions are being recommended to be classified or graded.
it's what's up now.
Well, that's
yeah,
the
that's
there's
what I
the
have, the
characteristic.
Oh, that's
characteristic chart.
characteristic. Yeah.
The other chart, I don't think was in the packet. It shows you that, again, if I can hold it up, you can see it. It looks like just like this. Everybody see that?
Right.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have that.
That's the classification plan that Mary Beth was saying. And what I told her, this is an accurate chart. The detail behind that is that other salary survey range chart, that Excel spreadsheet that had the years of service and rates of pay and everything.
We
So
have
those
that
are the-
document. I was gonna say, we have that document from the initial paperwork that you gave us.
Yeah, it should have been in your packet going back to,
Right, it is.
yeah, you
I
should have
have
that. So those are the
to
two
sum-
documents.
Don, just to summarize, so the two things that we're looking at right now, the proposed grade plan, the characteristic chart, which doesn't involve any salary or money or anything like that. So we're not voting on that right now.
That's right.
We're looking at what the employee does. And this shows all the characteristics according to the level, the grade level.
Mhm.
And it's either an existing employee or future employee. And so somewhere within this characteristic chart, let's say we decide, the personnel board decides that it's a grade level 2. We're voting on, for grade level 2, all of these characteristics fit into that category. And then the second thing we're voting on is at a grade level 2, this second chart, which shows the market equity pay band, how we're going to pay a grade level 2, for example.
Well, it shows you the minimum and the maximum.
Right. Those are the two charts that we're voting to recommend.
That's correct.
This one is the market equity pay band, and the one
Yep.
that you just had on the screen is the proposed grade plan characteristic chart. Those are the two we're voting on.
Correct.
Okay.
That and this.
All right. So I think, is there any further discussion from the board on those two documents?
Oh, not for me.
No.
All right, so I would ask for a motion to accept these two documents to move forward to the Board of Selectmen.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposed grade plan characteristic chart and the market equity pay band as presented today.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, I'm going to take a roll vote. Joan,
Aye.
Mary Beth,
Aye.
Lorna, aye. So this has passed.
So, Madam Chair, could we either have a written recommendation signed by you to just affirm that vote for the selectmen, or could you show up at the next Zoom meeting for the Board of Selectmen? And
When is that meeting?
I have to ask my deputy.
February 8th.
February 8th. Let me look. I don't believe I mean, it's an evening meeting and I don't go anywhere in the evening, but I want to put it on my calendar. Yes, what time?
6:30?
Okay, is it going to be the same ID?
No,
Will you
We'll
send me
out
that
an
info?
invitation. Yep.
You said what time, 6:30?
yes,
Okay, and you'll send me that Zoom ID number and password?
yes.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, I will do the Zoom meeting.
So Don, we might be able to get, you may be off the hook for that meeting, because if we have a recommendation from the personnel board after they voted on it, why muddy it up and wait, and we'll say, we'll keep you in reserve for the next step, which I think you'll need to go up for.
Yeah, that's fine. The only thing I would ask, John, is that we go back over the chart that caused some confusion, relative to the rate of pay and the years
Oh,
of
yeah,
service.
definitely. Yeah.
We just want to make sure we get those right.
And could you, for our own edification, Michelle, when that update is made to that chart, could you send a copy to all three of us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that'll be the next step, right, Don?
That's correct. So I guess the last thing I just wanted to say, Lorna, is that I would just ask the Personnel Board, once again, once the selectmen have approved tentatively, again, it's not a final approval, a classification compensation plan, then the next step is then to talk about paying employees.
Okay,
And at that point, obviously, I would assume we would come back to you at some point, once we've developed a recommended process to pay employees, for you to be giving some thought as to, what you think are ways that, you want to see employees compensated. And again, it's not how much, it's, what do you think is the best way to do it? And we'll have that conversation at a later date.
thank you,
I
Don.
also want to thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't express my appreciation to you. Believe me when I tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked with a lot of personnel boards, and rarely have I had the opportunity to work with a board like yours that really takes the time to understand and then make a decision as to what you feel is in the town's best interest. And so I really appreciate the feedback, and it's been a real pleasure working with you up until now. And frankly, I look forward to working with you to complete this plan.
Okay.
I want to thank you.
Don. Thank you for the time that you've put in. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
So there's only one other item on the agenda, and that would be, as I don't have the agenda, the final item was not new
Sexual
business.
harassment.
The only other thing that, and Jonathan wanted to know about the sexual harassment, and he and I had a conversation, and God knows how far back that was, about the fact that my concern that there wasn't a woman in that position to help review.
Mhm.
And John, you had suggested that you were going to speak to Lori.
Yes, and I've spoken to Lori a lot of times, but not about that. I may have actually mentioned it to her. I will have an answer. I'd like to put another personnel board meeting on the books, make sure that and I'll have an answer for you at the next meeting.
Right, that will be fine. So we're looking at February for a next board personnel. Is that what you're looking at, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think if we have the meeting after the Board of Select meeting on the 8th, we can resume with Don and get to step 2.
So what day are you looking at? Are you looking at the 9th or the following week?
The 9th might be a little bit, let's do the following week. I think the 9th might be a little bit too quick after the meeting.
Yeah, all right, the 16th works because the following week on a Tuesday, I have a port flush, so. So we're looking at what time on that Tuesday?
Same time, 10, does that work for
That works
everybody?
for me. Does it work for everybody else?
It's
Yes, it's fine.
Zoom meeting, right?
Yes.
Zoom meeting.
Okay, yep, that works. All right, so is there any other business that needs to come forward?
Nope.
I don't have any.
I would say that we're behind on getting, and there's justification for it, but we're behind in getting employee performance and evaluations done for this
Oh, yeah.
fiscal year. We're actually,
Way behind.
what we would have to do is agree on goals and objectives as the first part of the plan, and actually do a progress review. We'd have to kind of fast track it for everyone. But I think if we're looking at this compensation study and so forth, it's more important than ever that we get something on the books for employee evaluation. So, I think we're just going to move forward on that unless the personnel board has a objection to it. I'll just send out a memo to department heads, ask them to do Part A and Part B, which is the planning phase and the progress phase with their employees, and then hopefully we can get back on track for the end of the fiscal year, which is, believe it or not, coming pretty quickly.
Okay.
I do have one other question. John, are we still in the process of hiring a clerk for highway planning and conservation?
We don't have a budget from the state yet for the next fiscal year, so it's on my radar screen, but I'm not in any sort of a process to do it yet.
Thank you.
John, could I just ask you a question? With regard to establishing your goal and objectives, what I'd like to do, if you're okay with it, I'd like to give you a work chart to use to help you do that.
Sure.
And if you could have Michelle send me a copy of what you currently use. I'd just like to take a look at that. I don't think you've given me that before, but I do have a one-page worksheet that I'd like to recommend you take a look at and consider using to help you, again, develop a process to solicit from your department heads what they want to accomplish. Are you talking about next fiscal year or the current end of the year review?
I'm talking about getting the FY21
All right, so for next fiscal year.
performance evaluations done.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought you were doing. Okay. Yeah, so the chart I'll send you is a worksheet to help you do that. And as I said, if I could just take a look at what you've been using, so that I can compare the two documents and see whether they're, how they relate to one another.
Okay, the only other, while we're talking about it, I have a format that is just the standard format that puts phase 8, the planning phase, the progress phase, and the final review phase on one document, as opposed to in the past, we've gone back and forth with 3 separate documents, and it becomes kind of a nightmare. All this does is put it on one single document. It doesn't change
Right.
or anything except for it's all there on one document. So
Yeah.
one
again,
document as opposed to 3 documents are passed
Right.
around 3 times a year. And if the
Yeah.
personnel board doesn't have any objection to that, I'd like to just use that single document format.
That's fine with
Fine
me.
Okay, good.
Would you like a motion to that?
No, I think if it's understood, that's fine if there are no objections.
No, there isn't. I don't have an objection.
Okay,
Yeah, and again, John, just to clarify that the document I'm talking about is a worksheet to help you, not to change your current document, but to help you write that document. It's sort of like a detail sheet behind it.
right. Okay.
Okay?
What I'll do is I'll send that out to department heads and have them use that as kind of a guide.
Yeah, and again, just send me a copy of it so I can see what it looks like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other business?
I don't have any.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for your time, which is precious, I understand. So thank you for doing all of this. And I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Mary
Aye.
Beth,
Aye.
Joan,
Aye.
and I say aye.
John, if you're still there, I have a question not related to personnel.
Okay.
I'll stand by.
Not Joan, John.
Oh,
Is he gone?
No, he's there.
here.
I was just wondering, I've been checking the Dudley website on the coronavirus